Welcome to Booksmart. Before we start this course, I'm going to show a trailer for our next course starting in the beginning of May, a 4-lesson course called Supernatural. And here's the trailer.
Welcome to the pre-boarding announcement for Supernatural, a 4-session journey into the spiritual world of science, spirits, and superstition in Jewish belief. Please direct your attention to the following information as we walk you through our voyage. Our journey begins with exploring the essence of dreams. Discover which dreams hold meaningful messages and which are just noise to ignore, not to be taken seriously. We ask that you remain seated as we'll traverse the heights of astrology. We'll discover if the stars have any power on affecting our nature, behavior, or destiny. We may experience some turbulence as we travel through the world of jinxes and curses. See how Judaism navigates the social realities of jealousy and curses and where the real power lies. On our final leg of the journey, we will experience the true role of spirits, angels, and ghosts. We'll also touch down in the afterlife and learn how to keep in touch with lost loved ones. It'll be quite the ride, one you don't want to miss. On behalf of everyone at Supernatural, we hope you'll join us on this incredible experience.
Love that.
Okay, so that's exciting. That's coming in the beginning of May. Okay, now we're on to our last lesson. So it's bittersweet. It's exciting. We saved the best for last, but it's sweet. It's coming to a conclusion. So far, we have discovered in lesson 1, we covered scripture, the Torah, the Tanakh. In lesson 2, we've gone on to cover Medrash. In lesson 3, the Talmud. Lesson 4, Halacha, Jewish law. And lesson 5, Jewish philosophy and psychology, Hakira and Musar. And now we're in lesson 6. In lesson 6, we're going to discuss Kabbalah and Chasidus, or in translated as Kabbalah and Chasidut. Okay, fine. So that's so let's get into definitions. What does Kabbalah mean? We have figure 6.1 on page 234. Kabbalah means received. So what's so mysterious about that? The whole oral tradition is received. Moshe kibel Torah Sinai. Moses kibel received the Torah from Sinai, passed it on to Joshua, who passed it on to the elders, who passed it to the prophets, to the judges, all the ways down the ages. So what makes Kabbalah different than any other part of the received tradition? What makes it different is its other name that Kabbalah goes by in Jewish writings. It's also called Sod. Sod means secret. So Kabbalah's teachings are received secrets, transmitted through the generation. These are teachings, these are secrets that even if someone told it to you out loud, it would still be a secret. It would still be undecipherable in a regular context. You have to be in a specialized setting to understand the deep mysteries and meanings. So it's not just secret because nobody said it, it's secret in its essence. And that is Kabbalah. That's what we're going to study today. Let's take a look at Maimonides describing the process of how Kabbalah was taught throughout the ages. Now, typically when we think about Maimonides, we don't think of him as a Kabbalist. He didn't write any overtly Kabbalistic works, although he quotes from Kabbalistic writings on occasion. However, here he's describing what it takes to learn Kabbalah. Let's get a volunteer to read text 1. Start with Genya. Text 1 for us, please.
Okay, hidden kernels. Maimonides. Okay, as you are well aware, even the Talmud, which was received by tradition, was not originally committed to writing in a book that was disseminated to the public, to the people. Now, if care was taken to avoid writing the oral Torah in a book accessible to all because of the disadvantages in such a system, certainly then no portion of the esoteric teachings of Torah could be written, which would divulge these teachings to everyone. Rather, these teachings were orally communicated by a few uniquely qualified individuals to other uniquely qualified individuals. As I earlier explained, the saying, Talmud Chagiga, the secrets of the Torah can only be entrusted to skilled sages. Nothing but a few remarks and allusions to these teachings are to be found in the Talmud and the Midrashim. They are like small kernels enveloped in many husks, so that the reader is generally occupied with the husk without thinking that it enclosed a kernel.
Okay, so what Maimonides describes here, that is doubly secret. First of all, it was only taught to a select group, and even in that group, the language used, the terminology used was inherently cryptic. Now, the people within that group had the training to understand what the term meant. Have you ever tried to read a science paper that wasn't dumbed down in the news? You don't understand what's happening. Well, Kabbalah has that as well. It's a certain language that's very hard to decipher unless you're in the know. And how would you be in the know? If you had a teacher who explained it to you. So explain the how of Kabbalah, but we didn't explain the why. So we're going to go on to explain the why. At the outset, the reason for the why is in text 2. Let's take a look at why it's done in this fashion. Text 2, Maddie, if you can read first text 2.
4 who entered the orchard. 4 sages the orchard. Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Acher, and Rabbi Akiva. Ben Azai looked and died. Ben Zoma looked and went mad. Acher cut down the plantings, i.e. became a heretic. Rabbi Akiva entered in wholeness and peace, and emerged in wholeness and peace.
So we have here a teaching of 4 great sages who entered the Pardes and had 4 different reactions. So what is the Pardes? The Pardes means an orchard. The word paradise comes from the Hebrew word Pardes. It means a delightful orchard, and it refers to the mystical parts of Torah. So these 4 great sages went into studying the mystical parts of Torah, and they had 4 different reactions. Ben Azai was so overwhelmed by the experience that he had his soul short-circuited from the body. It just escaped. It wanted to be part of this greater wholeness. We have a similar record of Aaron's 2 sons in the Bible, Nadav and Avihu, coming close to the holiness and being enveloped in the holiness. It was something they were desiring, but they died as a result of that experience. And we have other descriptions throughout history of people that try to engage in deep intimacy with the mystical, deep levels of Hashem, and they passed away. Now they probably didn't mind passing away. For them, it's like, what's better than this? My soul is going back. It's coming part of the greater oneness of Hashem. But then you had another person that was so overwhelmed by the experience, he went crazy. You had a third person who couldn't properly assimilate the ideas in mysticism, that he became a heretic. This man, he was one of the greatest Jewish sages of all times. He was the teacher of Rabbi Meir. There's a teaching that we read last week in Pirkei Avot, don't judge a book by its cover. It was almost like that teaching. Don't look at a vessel, but only at what it contains. That was taught by Rabbi Meir, referring to the fact that he would continue learning from this great sage even after he became a heretic. says, don't worry about the vessel. Yeah, my teacher's a heretic, but the wealth of information of the tradition that he contains within him is still worthy of learning from him. So that was one of the ways this teaching would apply. You don't have to embrace the whole person just because you could always benefit from everyone. Okay, but you had one person, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva managed to come out successfully from this endeavor. What was the secret? Well, we just read the secret. He went in peace. He went in with the proper training and perspective and agenda. When you go in properly, then you can leave properly. If you don't go in with the proper framing, the proper goals, the proper training, then you could have a disastrous experience. So we explain that it's very important. So for a long time, Kabbalah was taught in this very secretive way to secret group who had proper training, and that's it. You know, there's the joke of one of the Verstanic brothers told me this joke. I don't remember which one, but one of there was a man leaving Russia, and at customs, the security guard says, "What is this?" He points to a gold bust of Lenin. He said, "What do you mean, what is this? Who is this? This is Father Lenin, who brought about the great revolution for so many workers." So he says, "Oh, go through." He arrives in America at customs. The customs says, "What is this?" He says, "What is this? Who is this? This is the murderer who murdered so many people with his ideas. I plan to put this on my toilet seat, and whenever I'm going to the bathroom, it's going to be an insult for the horrors he caused." Fine. He arrives at his grandson's house in the Bronx. His grandson is looking through the bag. And he says, "Who is this?" The grandfather says, "Who is this? What is this? 8 pounds of solid gold," right? So sometimes three people are looking at the same thing, but if you don't have the right framing, you can have different answers to the same questions. So here you had 4 people came into the partis, but they didn't all have the right goal, so it didn't lead, or the right training, so it didn't lead to healthy results. Which leads us to our next question, which we'll answer soon, is, so why are we doing lesson 6 today? Do we have the training to study Kabbalah? Why did it become so popular, not so secretive? And that's what we're going to try to touch on that today. And we will actually study some Kabbalah in this class. And by doing that, we'll see what could be so dangerous about learning Kabbalah and what changed and why we learn Kabbalah today.
Rabbi, are we
Yes.
really learning the true essence of Kabbalah, or is it very watered down? Because, like you said, there's so many Kabbalah classes, and there's Tanya, which is Kabbalah based, but
You'll see. We're going to look at a passage of Zohar. And you'll see. I'll try to you're asking a good question, and you'll see why so many people water down Kabbalah or do pop Kabbalah. We're going to get to all of that. We're going to cover all of that in the list. The first thing to remember is the most powerful thing in the world is not money, it's not strength, it's ideas. Ideas have tremendous power, and we see throughout history what toppled countries is ideas. What changed societies is ideas. Ideas have tremendous power. And Kabbalah is the secret, the most intense of Jewish ideas, of Torah wisdom, of God wisdom, and it has tremendous power. And this power in the wrong hands, dangerous, terrible. In the proper context, it's not only good, it's life-saving. And that is a hint to why we have Kabbalah today. Why Kabbalah is so popular is it's literally life-saving, and we so desperately need it. So we have the partis, is that orchard, that esoteric secrets of the Torah, and a garden of spiritual delights. The most powerful ideas are found in the secret parts of the Torah that we're going to study today. So Kabbalah deals with the most fundamental truth of our existence. When misunderstood, these principles can be distorted and become destructive. And that's why it has always been taught in select few. Now, I've stated a fact. We're going to taste later on in the lesson of how an idea misapplied can be so destructive. But we'll see that later today. So hence the concealment of Kabbalah through history. We're now going to study the history of Kabbalah. I want you to also follow along in your student book on page 238, where you'll get a timeline of the major Jewish books of Kabbalah together with the authors.
The Jewish mystical tradition, the Kabbalah, formed an integral part of the Torah's transmission from its very beginnings. The earliest Kabbalistic works are attributed to Abraham, the first Jew, or even earlier to Adam, the first man. The Talmud and the Midrashim incorporate many Kabbalistic passages. These teachings, however, were the exclusive province of a small number of sages who engaged in the study of this esoteric wisdom, and even fewer who dared to disseminate it. The prophet Ezekiel's vision of the divine chariot, Merkava, recorded in the book of Ezekiel, is the biblical source for many Kabbalistic principles and ideas. A number of early Kabbalistic texts were composed in Mishnaic times, in the 1st and 2nd century of the Common Era. These texts, however, are extremely terse and mysterious, their meaning decipherable only to those who were privy to the oral tradition that accompanied them. The great Mishnaic sage Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught the wisdom of Kabbalah to a close circle of disciples. These discourses and discussions were recorded in the Zohar, which remains the most basic text of Kabbalah. The Zohar, however, would remain a secret text for more than 1,000 years, although snippets of it found their way into some of the Torah works composed in the interim. The first fissures in the veil of secrecy surrounding Kabbalah began to appear in the 12th century in Spain, France, Italy, and Germany, where small groups of Kabbalists and their disciples were expounding and transcribing their teachings. It was during this period that the Zohar was first published, making its hitherto hidden teachings available to those who were admitted into the secretive Kabbalistic circles. The Hasidim of Ashkenaz was a school of Jewish mystics who were active in the German Rhineland in the 12th and 13th centuries. Its leaders, Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid and Rabbi Elazar Rokeach of Worms. One of the preeminent sages of Spanish Jewry, Nachmanides, authored important works in all areas of Torah, biblical commentary, Talmudic analysis, Torah law, philosophy, and ethics. Nachmanides was also a master Kabbalist who incorporated many Kabbalistic ideas into his commentary on the Torah. Rabbi Abraham Abulafia and his disciples, active in 13th century Italy, emphasized the practice of meditative Kabbalah and the attainment of mystical union with God. Other noted Kabbalists of the medieval period include the anonymous author of the foundational Kabbalistic work Ma'arechet HaElokut and Rabbi Yosef Gikatila, Rabbi Menachem Merkanti, Rabbi Meir ibn Gabbai, and Rabbi Yehuda Chayat. Despite the surge in dissemination by the medieval Kabbalists, Kabbalah was still a secret discipline, studied and taught by an exclusive circle of mystics. The next breakthrough came in the mid-16th century, when Tzfat, a city in the north of the Holy Land, became a center of Jewish mystical learning. One of the early teachers of Kabbalah in Tzfat was Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz, who is known as the author of the mystical poem Lecha Dodi, Come My Beloved to Meet the Bride, sung in Jewish communities on Friday evening to welcome the Shabbat. Rabbi Yosef Karo, known primarily as the author of the Shulchan Aruch Code of Jewish Law, was also an accomplished Kabbalist, who recorded his mystical visions in his Magid Mesharim. At the hub of the Tzfat mystics were two great teachers of Kabbalah, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, known as Ramak, and Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, known by the acronym ARI, the Lion. Ramak's encyclopedic Pardes Ramonim, Orchard of Pomegranates, was a first-of-its-kind, systematic explanation of the multitude of worlds, Sefirot, and concepts that populate Kabbalistic teaching. Ari, although his sojourn in Tzfat was cut short after only 2 years when he died in a plague at the age of 38, left behind numerous disciples and a vast body of teachings. Indeed, almost all subsequent Jewish mystical learning is predicated on the Ari's teaching. Ari revolutionized the realm of Jewish mystical learning by proclaiming that the restrictions on disseminating Kabbalistic teachings applied only in earlier generations, and that in these times it is permitted and obligatory to reveal this wisdom. As a result, a number of Ari's disciples labored to record and publicize his teachings and to seed centers of Kabbalistic learning throughout the Jewish world. One of these disciples, Rabbi Israel Sarug, traveled for 20 years throughout Italy, the Balkans, Germany, Poland, Turkey, Egypt, and elsewhere to introduce the Lurianic Kabbalah. From Tzfat, the teachings of Kabbalah spread across the Jewish world. In the following generations, additional masters and schools of Kabbalistic learning developed in various Jewish communities. Maharal was a mystic and philosopher who expressed Kabbalistic ideas in philosophical terms. His teachings influenced many subsequent schools of Jewish thought. Maharal's Kabbalah appears to derive from earlier sources, as the Tzfatian Kabbalah had not yet reached Eastern Europe in his day. There is a tradition that Maharal used Kabbalistic formulae to create a golem, a humanoid, to save the Jewish community of Prague from the frequent blood libels of the time. Another influential figure in Jewish philosophy and mysticism was Rabbi Yeshayahu Horowitz, who served as a rabbi in numerous Jewish communities in both Europe and the Holy Land, including Dubna, Frankfurt, Prague, Jerusalem, Tzfat, and Tiberias. He's known as Shalah, after his magnum opus, Shnei Luchot HaBrit, 2 Tablets of the Covenant, which blends Kabbalah, Talmudic discourse, Torah law and customs, biblical commentary, and ethics. Shalah's works incorporate the teachings of Ramak and Ari and their disciples. Other 16th and 17th century Kabbalists include Rabbi Yisrael Najar of Gaza, Rabbi Menachem Azaria di Fano of Italy, and Rabbi Naftali Hertz Bachrach of Germany. Prominent 18th century Kabbalists include Ramchal, a prodigious author of Kabbalah, philosophy, ethics, and poetry, and Rabbi Chaim ibn Attar. The Gra school of Kabbalah encompasses the Kabbalistic teachings of Rabbi Eliyahu, the Gaon of Vilna, and his disciples. In Jerusalem, the Bet El School of Kabbalah was a center of mystical learning for 250 years. Its leaders included Rabbi Shalom Sharabi of Yemen and Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, the Chidah. Notwithstanding all of this activity and publications, Kabbalah remained a closed book for the great majority of Jews. The teachings remained esoteric, requiring a subtle mind and extensive knowledge and training to properly understand. As a rule, the restrictions placed on the study of Kabbalah were still widely enforced. For example, a person had to be past the age of 40 and had to be thoroughly versed in the revealed portions of the Torah, such as Talmud and Halacha, before they would be permitted to approach its hidden element. The final breakthrough, which paved the way for the realization of the Ari's declaration that the time had come for the inner soul of Torah to be revealed, came with the founding of the Hasidic movement by Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov in 1734. In addition to revealing an entirely new dimension of Torah, Hasidism also popularized and made accessible the teachings of Kabbalah by explaining its ideas in ways that made them comprehensible and applicable to all.
That's a lot, but that's very powerful. And of course, you can watch a replay on the website, myjli.com/booksmart. Any questions before we move on?
When was it changed? I think remember as a child here, you're not supposed to learn Kabbalah until you're 40, but somehow, I don't know, in the last between 10, 20 years, it seems like it's.
So the Arizal taught 550 years ago that the rule is no more. It should be exposed. But since the language was esoteric, there were still the risks involved. Once Hasidism came along and made the language relatable and explained it in a rational way, so then the limits completely dropped. But that was only if you were studying Hasidism. There was a fear in the founding of Hasidic movement. There was a fear that Hasidism would corrupt Judaism instead of enhancing Judaism, which we'll explore in a moment. We'll see the dangers of Kabbalah exposed, but that fear didn't play out. And eventually all Jewish groups assimilated the fundamental teachings of Hasidus that Hasidus expressed, which are Kabbalistic ideas. So Hasidus has 2 roles. One role is to explain Kabbalah in a relatable way, but also has an entirely different role outside of that we'll explain towards the end of the lesson. So even groups that oppose Hasidus, like the Gaon of Vilna, Eliyahu of Vilna put a ban on Hasidism he himself was one of the greatest Kabbalists of his time. And his students and he himself wrote many Kabbalistic works, but they always saw it as this is exclusive for elite. At that time, there was a big part of Jewish people. The majority of Jewish people at that time were devout Jews, completely burnt out. They were looked down upon by the elite Jews who said, you guys don't know how to learn, you don't know how to read, you don't remember the traditions. And these people were poor and ignorant, and so they were kind of cut off. And so they were going to die spiritually. Came along Hasidism, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, and he said, using the medicine of the great secrets of Kabbalah, I'm going to revive the soul of the Jewish people. And by teaching, he initiated a mass group of Jews, and him together with a team of many other mystics brought back thousands, hundreds of thousands of Jews from the brink. But as time went along, greater amounts of great sages as well came to join the Hasidic camp, besides for the mystics, when they realized the benefits. Yes, Joe.
So what I don't understand is, before we learned these 4 people entered the garden, now you're saying that hundreds or thousands and thousands of people are studying the precepts, but we don't hear those kinds of ramifications.
We're going to workshop Kabbalistic ideas and Hasidic teachings on those ideas, and you'll see why it wasn't an option earlier and why it became an option later. So you're absolutely right. Let's begin by saying the obvious. Before Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi wrote down the oral tradition in the Mishnah, it was considered outlandish for the Mishnah to be written down, because it's an oral tradition not meant to be written. And yet Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi saw that there was a great risk. If we don't write it down, the whole oral tradition could be lost. And so he wrote down cliff notes. Then 500 years later, when the oral tradition was lost, but the cliff notes were still available, then you had the next group of sages to try to unpack those cliff notes called the Mishnah, and that gave us the Talmud. And throughout every stage of history, there's always been this balance of not writing down, because there's a risk. When you write things down, people think they get the full picture from a line, and they miss the context. And you can take things out of context when you just have a text. And so even Kabbalah today, we have many books on Kabbalah today, and Chassidus, I would say, is the way to, if you want to enter into Kabbalah, the way to do it, and the way that I do it, is through the study of Chassidus, and we'll see why. But it's still advisable to, as much as possible, to learn it from a teacher who learned it from a teacher who learned it from a teacher, all the ways back up the chain, instead of learning it from a teacher who only learned it from the books. You want to try to learn it from a teacher who heard it from, who's a student of another teacher, all the ways up the chain. That's the idea. Okay. So let us get a taste. So why did it change? Let's go through why did it change. Remember, we said ideas have power. The main 2 reasons why it changed is 2 phenomena that they seem contradictory, but they happen at the same time. The one, the world has gone crazy. That happened about 200, 300 years ago. The world has started to become crazy. Okay? And in the Zohar, there's a statement on the verse in Noah's flood. It says, in the 600th year. So the Zohar, there will be a flood of higher waters and lower waters. Now that verse in the Torah is describing when Noah turned 600 years old. At those times, the Torah describes people with long lifespans. So when in the 600th year of Noah's life, the higher waters and the lower waters emerged, and you had the great flood. The Zohar says on this, in the 6th millennia, from Adam's creation. In the 600th year, there'll be an explosion of lower waters, which means lower wisdom, scientific wisdom, and higher waters, mystical wisdom, will be revealed. Now, when is the 6th millennia? This is the Zohar that was written 2,000 years ago. When is the 6th millennia? We're in the 6th millennia because we're in the Hebrew year 5783, which means the 6th millennia. We're in the 6,000 years, and the 600th year was 183 years ago, right? And about that time, 183 years ago, there's been a great scientific revolution and a great spiritual, and these are ideas. The ideas exploded, spiritual wisdom and scientific wisdom. So that was one of the great needs, was the craziness that the world was going through and the illness of the people of its time. One time, the tradition goes that one of the early Hasidic leaders, his name was Dov Ber of Mizrich. He was the second generation after the Baal Shem Tov. He lived at the same time, and he was his successor. He became deathly ill. Why is he becoming deathly ill? Because there was a great Jewish sage who was walking down the street, and he saw a leaflet of Kabbalah just rolling around in the gutter. He says, what a disgrace. The jewels of God's crown is just floating around. It's been too exposed. And who was very involved in that exposure? Reb Dov Ber of Mizrich. So Reb Dov Ber of Mizrich became very ill. And everyone was discussing, it was a whole discussion in the court of the Mizrich, the Maggid of Mizrich. You know, is the Maggid right or wrong for this big revelation? And his youngest student was a man named Reb Shneir Zalman of Liadi, the founder of the Chabad Hasidic movement. He said, I'll give a parable. He said, it's like a king, and the king has a son, an only son who's deathly ill. They're seeking a remedy, and they can't find a cure. Until one physician comes, he says, there's actually one cure. The one cure is that you have the gemstone, that's the corner piece of your crown, the centerpiece of your crown. If we grind it up and we mix it in a solution and we pour it down this paralyzed child's throat, maybe a drop of it will go in. Most of it will run down the cheek and will be lost, but maybe a drop will enter and maybe he'll survive. So what do you think the king does? This is a jewel that's been kept in the monarch's crown through centuries. What does the king do? He's going to do anything to save his only son, the successor to his monarch. See, he takes the crown jewel, he crushes it, and he feeds it to his son. Says that's what the Reb Dov Ber is doing here. He's taking the crown jewel, he's taking the secrets, mystical secrets, and he's crushing it. Most of it will get lost, will end up in the gutter, will be misused, mistranslated, but maybe a little bit will enter the soul of the Jewish people and will sustain the Jewish people through this terrible, dark time. But there's a second reason for Kabbalah, for the explosion of Kabbalah. That is the Jewish belief that Mashiach is about to come. The world is going through tremendous change, and it's Mashiach better come. Mashiach better come. And what will the world look like when Mashiach comes? What will people be doing when Mashiach comes? The prophet Isaiah says, besides for all the wonderful prophecies of the lion resting with the lamb, the lion and the lamb, and the abundance of things of goodness in the world, what will the people be doing in this beautiful world? Is they'll be studying the knowledge of God, which will cover the earth like the water covers the earth. So we're tasting a little bit of what we're going to be doing when Mashiach comes. Is all we're going to be doing is coming to know God. And Kabbalah is the way we come to go know God. Halacha, mitzvos, they tell us what God wants. They don't tell us about God himself. And Kabbalah is the topic that addresses God and his relationship with us. Let's go So Hasidism, so what made the risk more manageable is Hasidism translated Kabbalah into language comprehensible for everyone. That's one of the things that Hasidism comes to accomplish. It accomplishes other things as well, but that's one of its goals. Each generation actualizes a further stage in the divine-human partnership in Torah. This allows for teachings which were previously exclusive be attained by all. The Baal Shem Tov had a mystical vision. It's described in text 4. It says, on Rosh Hashanah, I went up to heaven and I saw Mashiach. And I asked Mashiach, Yisrael Baal Shem Tov is saying, and I asked Mashiach, when are you going to come? We're waiting. We've been waiting so long. When will you come already? He said, I'll come when these teachings are spread outwards. When these teachings are available to everyone, that's when I will come. So the coming of Mashiach represents the ultimate realization of what Judaism aims to accomplish. Additionally, besides for Hasidism coming to explain Kabbalah, its Hasidus also tries to show the essence and harmony of all the varied parts of Torah. Hasidus tries to show that you cannot isolate the written Torah from the oral Torah, the Jewish law, from the Talmud, from the Medrash, from Kabbalah. They all need each other. They're coming from one source, and so they're all connected. They all feed on each other. And so that's something Hasidism tries to do, is to try to show the harmony and integration of all levels of Torah. So let's begin our workshop. Let's go to text 5. Let's begin on text 5. And now here, what I want you to do is, if you can, pay attention on a scale of 1 to 10. Tell me how understandable is this teaching. We're going to go to a text from the Zohar. Zohar is the foundational text of Kabbalah. We're going to read a teaching of Zohar. Kenya asked, is this what everyone's learning when people say, I'm studying Kabbalah? Are they studying this kind of text? So let's take a look at text 5. Gail, read for us in a loud voice, text 5.
It breaks in supernal purity. At the beginning of the manifestation of the king's will, the lamp of darkness engraved engravings in the supernal purity. It emanated from the most concealed of all concealed things, from the secret of endless. A formless vapor was inserted into a circle that was neither white nor black, nor red nor green, nor any color at all. When he began its measurements, he created bright colors to shine forth. From within the center of the lamp, a fountain spouted, from which the colors down below were painted.
Okay. Does anyone understand anything from text 5? You see what I mean when I say that it wasn't only secret because it was kept secret. Even when you read it, it's inherently ambiguous, hard to understand. But the treat of today is we're going to study some foundational building blocks of Kabbalah, not all of them, but some of them. And by the end, we're going to look back at this passage and say, I'm starting to get it. I get it. And that will be an amazing gift if we can all do that. But that's Zohar, okay? So let's try to make sense of this. In this teaching, what the Zohar is coming to explain is a great paradox. Let's look at the two sides of this paradox. Let's start with, remember we said that Kabbalah is found in other works, not just in Kabbalistic works, but it's found in the Talmud and in other places. So let's take a sampling of a Kabbalistic teaching that's found in the Talmud. Text 6. Stan, if you can read for us text 6.
The soul of the universe. God fills the world with souls that, like the souls fill the body. That's it?
That's it. God fills the world like the soul fills the body. What does this mean? Well, Two things. First of all, where in your body is the soul?
You would think in your head, but probably everywhere.
It's everywhere. Now, there are places where it feels more concentrated in your head or in your heart, but it's everywhere also. It's in your toes. It's wherever you are, whichever part of your body responds to you when someone calls your name. Which part of your body responds? All of you. The whole being, you turn around when someone calls your name. Your feet move, turn around. Why? Because your soul, your essence is everywhere. It's all part of your body. However, if God forbid someone's leg is amputated, does he have less soul in his body? No. His soul is still the same. He didn't lose his soul. His soul just lost a vehicle of expression. This great teaching gives us great insight. God's relationship with the universe. God fills the entire universe. However, he's not affected and hurt by the universe, so to speak. Right? Just like what happens to the body doesn't innately hurt the soul. It just limits its ability to express itself. So creation is an expression of God. It's a powerful teaching. It also teaches us. Yeah, okay. Now, is this idea, anyone see anything dangerous in this idea? What's dangerous about this idea is we just made God in our image. We just said, just like my soul fills my body, God is the soul of the world. Say, what's wrong with that? Let's read text 7. This is Moses' speech to the Jewish people. He tells them, guard your souls exceedingly, as you have not seen any form on the day that God spoke to you at Horeb, at Mount Sinai, from within the fire. Lest you be corrupted and make for yourselves a graven image, the form of any symbol, and be led astray to bow to it and worship it. And Moses is saying, all of you had a mystical experience at Mount Sinai. You all saw God. But when you saw, what did you see? Did you see something physical? God forbid. No, it wasn't physical. So never get that in your head that God is physical. Now, why is it so important? Let's just read it as Maimonides codifies it. Maimonides codifies this teaching as one of his 13 principles. He says the third principle is the negation of any physical qualities in regard to God, meaning we believe that the one God is neither a physical entity nor a physical force, nor is he subject to any physical state. God is not physical. He's not describable. Everything in this world, Maimonides goes on to explain, everything in this world is a composite. When we say one person, yeah, that one person is an organism that contains lungs, hearts, different parts. And even the most singular part of the human person is also made up of many parts. Everything in this world is a composite of many different things. God, when we say God is one, we don't only mean that there isn't 22 gods. There's just one God. We mean God is the only singularity in the world. There's only one singularity. That's God. Everything else is multiplicity, is made up of different parts. And God, that singularity, since it doesn't exist in our world, we can't describe it. Whenever we begin to describe it, we're becoming pagan. Now, why is that so dangerous? What's so dangerous? And not, as Isaiah says the Holy One, to what can you liken me? Text 9, to what can you liken me? What that I could be compared. You can't compare me to anything. So on the one hand, the Talmud gave us a description that gave us some insight. On the other hand, it could be very dangerous because God is singular. He's undefinable. He's unknowable. And then once you make him knowable, then you run the risk of making God in your image. However, why do we try to explain God? Why is it important to know about God? So besides for the fact that we explained last week that there's a mitzvah to know God, but also the other belief in Judaism, there's one fundamental belief, God's singularity. The other belief is God's closeness to us. God cares about us. We can make God cry, so to speak. We can make God happy. We look at text 10 for 2 verses, one from Exodus and one from Chronicles, where it describes God's character, a compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness and truth. Or the second verse, unto you God is greatness and power and beauty and triumph and splendor. Unto you God is kingship. So hold on, God is made up of parts. There's God when he gets angry. There's God when he's compassionate. God also has parts. But these are biblical verses. This is not some man made it up. These are biblical verses. And these are both truths that Judaism believes. God is a singularity. He's undefinable. He's unknowable. And yet, God is close to us. And he expresses himself to us. And he has expectations from us. And he cares for us. And he cares what we do and how we lead our lives. This is a fundamental of all morality. If you believe God, so we have this tension. Either you make God in your image, and what happens? Your God becomes whatever you believe, because you made God in your image. So whatever's convenient to you, that's what God is. That's dangerous. No, there's only one God. But if you're to have a relationship with him, and if he cares about you, so then he has to interact with you with a certain way. It is this paradox that earlier teaching of Zohar that we read is coming to explain. And through the later writings, through the Arizal, through Chasidism, we'll see what is the solution to this paradox. How do we resolve, on the one hand, on the other hand? On the one hand, God is undefinable, God is indescribable. On the other hand, God cares for us, and he has feelings and thoughts. So does he have parts or does he not have parts? So that's why studying God's relationship with his creation can be dangerous. It may lead to attributing physical properties to God, heaven forbid. Right? And that's why they said, be careful. Be careful. So let's try to understand this. So on the one hand is we have the oneness of God is the most cardinal principle in Judaism. God is absolute singularity. While God cannot be defined, he is intimately involved in creation. So God expresses himself through the world he created. And these are the two sides of the paradox that Kabbalah is coming to understand and address. Before we address it Kabbalistically, we'll just explain it logically. And that is in the verse of King David. King David was also puzzled with this question. But how did he resolve this? Text 11. Would the one who implants the ear not hear? Would the one who forms the eye not see? In other words, he's saying, true, God doesn't have eyes like we have eyes. But if he gave us eyes and we could see, so certainly God can see. Right? So it's a logical proof. It must be that God sees and hears because we can hear. Where did we get that from? God gave it to us. So he can't give us something that he doesn't have. He can't be deficient. But this is a logical proof. We don't really explain how it works. So he has eyes, he doesn't have eyes. Kabbalah comes to explain it. And the language we're going to use today is we're going to learn two concepts. We're going to learn the concept of Sefirot and Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means contraction. These are the two Kabbalistic building blocks we're going to learn today. And that's going to help us answer this paradox. You ready? So we have a map of the 10 Sefirot on page 255. Before we do Sefirot, I'll be jumping around a little bit. We'll start with the concept of Tzimtzum. In general, when I create something, let's say I'm creating a table. What do I need to do? I need to go to Home Depot, buy the lumber, buy the tools, and create a table. That's called external creation, because I'm not creating things that I have. I don't have the wood. I need to buy the wood. The wood comes ready-made. Like the scientists came to God. They said, God, we think we could take it from here. We don't need you anymore. Says, really? You can make a man? Yes, we have all the technology to make a humanoid. We can do it. Says, go right ahead. So they start assembling all the ingredients. He says, no. Go create your own ingredients. Ultimately, all ingredients come from creation. So God created, but everything that we create is external from us. However, we also are able to create internally. When we have thoughts in our head, we have feelings, we're imagining a writing. We're making shifts within ourselves. So when we meditate and process a new dimension of the world, we pay attention to something that we didn't pay attention before. In our mind, we create a shift within ourselves. So that's called internal creation. It's realigning our inner world. So there's external creation, things outside of ourselves, and internal. External, creating something outside oneself, which is not a real creation, because we're really just assembling something that already existed. And then we have internal, creating something within oneself. When God created the universe, it's really all an internal creation. There's no space outside God. There's nothing that exists outside of Hashem. Everything that exists is an internal creation within God. And this, the Kabbalists explain, is the process of Tzimtzum. Let's take a look at here. What do you see when you look at this slide? White or nothing, right? Do you see anything? Do you see anything? Okay. God has within him two infinite powers. The infinite power of revelation and the infinite power of concealment. They're both modes, they're not his essence, but he can express himself in two ways. He's not inherently invisible. He's not inherently visible. He exists beyond those definitions. Those are defining to say God is visible, God is invisible, but he can express himself in infinitely revealed, and he also has another power, infinite concealment. Let's take a look at the next slide. And what do you see?
Or thing.
Thing. All we did, before there was white, here, all the white of the word thing was here. It was here. All we did was spill some ink and masked part of the whites. And what do you see? Now you see a thing. But this white was on the other slide before. What changed? When we block out some of the revelation that allows for something new to emerge. Now, was that something new really new? It's not new. It's just on this slide, it's infinite, all words are on this page. There's infinite possibilities. However, when you put a filter and hide many parts of God, and God only exposes himself in a limited fashion, then you see things emerge. Now it's kind of an illusion, because when I show you this slide, adults say, oh, it says thing. But when we contrast it with the early slide, we realize it doesn't really say thing. It's really just black hiding white, revealing whites. But to us, it seems, oh, it says thing. It's intuitive to us. So the same thing is, when God hides most of himself, to us, it seems like the thing is something new. It's separate from Hashem. It's separate from God. And that's how the whole of reality appears to us. The whole reality appears to us something external from God. And why does it appear to us that way? Because God made it so. God used his infinite power of concealment created a tzimtzum, a contraction. He contracted himself. He diminished from himself and squeezed himself, so you only see a small part of the infinite light. And that's the things. These things, the word thing that you see here, that's what the Kabbalists call Sefirot. Sefirot are whenever you have the mix of these two powers of infinite revelation with infinite concealment, what's generated is Sefirot. Sefirot are containers for light. So a sefer is a book. A book is a concealment or a revelation. Sefer is a book. It's concealment or it's revelation by limiting. It uses words to condense intense ideas into paper on a book. So whenever you're telling a story, you have to decide what to cut out from the story. The more you cut, the greater clarity the book will have. So you're creating clarity. So something new emerges. So that's the other word for Sefirot means like a sapphire, means brilliance. It really creates brilliance. So that's what the 10 Sefirot are. God, in his essence, is non-visible, is not revelation, is not concealment. But he expresses himself through revelation and concealment. And when those two forces come together, then you have Sefirot, his 10, and God has infinite Sefirot, but God chooses to express himself in 10. He limits himself to expressing himself in just 10. So this is the idea of tzimtzum contraction. God isolated a 10-dimension personality from within his infinite being. Let's take a look at a puzzling text from Genesis that without Kabbalah, it doesn't really make so much sense. But let's look at this reading in Genesis. Let's look at texts. Do we have text 12? Text 12. Let's look at text 12. Okay, Sharon, you read for us text 12, the divine image, page 254.
And God created the human in his image. In the divine image, he created him. Male and female, he created them.
Okay, this is a verse from the beginning of Torah, from the beginning of the 5 books of Moses. And without Kabbalah, this thing is very difficult to comprehend. And there's so many questions within this text, we're not even going to address all of them. But the simple reading is God says, let me create man in my image, in our image. Hold on. Didn't Moses tell the Jewish people you didn't see an image at Mount Sinai? God doesn't have an image? So what's going on? Oh, God, in essence, doesn't have an image. But through the Sefirot, through choosing to express himself in a specific way, he creates for himself an image. And then he creates within us a mirror image. And now the finite human being can have some kind of relationship with an infinite being. How? When that infinite being chooses to only express himself in these 10 Sefirot, in these 10 modes, and he gives us a parallel within that, these 10 Sefirot, now we have an interface. Now we can talk to each other. Now, it would be a mistake if we were talking to the 10 Sefirot and thought the Sefirot were God. No, it's just a paradigm. It's just a place, an interface for us to speak with the essence of Hashem. So it's a garment that Hashem puts on for us to be able to relate to him. It's not his essence. Sefirot are not God's essence, but it's a way he expresses himself. And now you understand what the Kabbalists are discussing when they're discussing Sefirot. There's 10 Sefirot. Let's look at the map. on page 255. Perfect. Here we have a description of the 10 Sefirot, 3 intellectual Sefirot, the higher Sefirot, and 7 lower Sefirot. We have within this also these 3 parallels. And when God created the world, he used the 22 letters expressing these Sefirot. So the lower 7 Sefirot, which is kindness and power and beauty, the lower 7 Sefirot, the emotional Sefirot, those represent the 6 days of creation. On each day of creation, on day 1, was a day of great revelation. Vayehi or, let there be light. But on the second day, God introduced discipline to the universe. He split between the higher waters and the lower waters. And then in the third day, he brought beauty, which is integration. And like a painting, you mix colors, you put in different things and it creates harmony. Well, that's what God did on the third day. He brought harmony between the spiritual and the physical. So there's a progression, and God used the Sefirot to create the world. He put it within us, the 10 Sefirot. So, and we are like a small universe. Human beings are like a small universe, which makes human beings unique. Everything else that exists are a derivative of only one of the 10 Sefirot. The sun, the moon, mountains, trees, everything, fire, water, everything else in the universe is an expression of only one of the Sefirot. Now you have within each Sefirah further subdivisions. So you 7 times 7, 49, but they're only expressing one. Human beings contain within us all 10. Just like God, that's what it means. God said, I'll create them in my image. So that's the relationship, the interface between human beings and Hashem. Any questions before we move on from here?
I mean, I can't picture myself having all,
So let's just make it practical. Let's start with benevolent. Are you ever generous, Sharon? Yeah, you're generous? So if a child says, can you give me that really sharp knife over there? Would you give him the knife? Well, I thought you're a generous person. So you're disciplined also. So now you're a generous person when it's appropriate. Your discipline tells you, your generous says, let me give. The discipline says, let me give in a healthy way. So now you just had generosity and discipline, which is what Tiferet. Tiferet is the synthesis. That's why it's in the middle column. It's a synthesis of the higher 2 parts of generosity and discipline. The next 3, Netzach and Hod, are not about your intent, but more about your style of how you're going to give it. Netzach is ambitious. It's your drive to do this in an ambitious way. Hod represents humility. And they're not a contradiction. It's just, if in an unhealthy way, they're a complete contradiction. And they're both bad in an unhealthy way. Ambition could be arrogance. Hod, which is submission or humility, could be low self-esteem and all the tragedies of that. But in a healthy way, they can be very powerful. And Yesod represents connection, attachment, and that could be healthy or unhealthy. That's why. And then Malchut represents empathy, putting ourselves in someone else's shoes, or receptiveness, or so going into somebody else's world, going out of our world into somebody else's world. Right, so you contain within that all those. That's a whole different topic than we discussed today, but we definitely have that. Okay. Let's go. So God imparted traits to himself. That is the image. God doesn't have an image. Yeah, he doesn't have an image. In his essence, he's pure. But when God relates to us, God imprints within himself an image by using those 2 forces of infinite revelation and infinite concealment in a mysterious way. He emanates the 10 Sefirot that would describe his relationship with his creation. So every creation is rooted in one of the 10 Sefirot. The human being, however, is like a mini world. Just like the whole world is 10 Sefirot, every human being incorporates all 10 Sefirot. Even angels. Angels, they're only one, they represent one of these columns, one of these Sefirot. So that's why when God needed to had a mission for angels on earth, he had to send 3 angels to Abraham. Why do you have to send 3? Because each one, they can't do multiple things. They can't multitask. The one that was bringing healing could only do healing. He cannot be the angel of destruction. It can't be the person who's bringing healing is bringing destruction. You need the angel to destroy Sodom. You need the angel to heal Abraham. You need different angels for different purposes. But human beings contain within us all 10. So in our image, when it says, let us make man in our image, meaning in the images we made for ourselves, represented in the structure of the 10 Sefirot. Now, how does Kabbalah explain this? So did God change? When he expresses himself only within 10 Sefirot, did God change? Did God become the 10 Sefirot? So the way the Kabbalists describe it, let's look at text 13 and 14. Okay, text 13 is from Rabbeinu Bechaya. This verse of let us make man in our image contains a very deep idea, which is sealed away in the treasure houses of the Kabbalists who seek out God. It holds the secret of the structure of the 10 Sefirot, which the human being incorporates in themselves, and for which the human form is an analog. God therefore says, in our image, meaning in the image we made for ourselves. And that's why the Kabbalists, when they draw out the 10 Sefirot, they kind of form a human body. There's the head, the intellect on top, and there's the right arm and the left arm and the right hand and the left leg, the right leg and the left leg. If you look at the map, you'll kind of notice that it looks a little bit like a human being. But let's look at text 14. This is coming back to the Zohar. Let us make, now the passage we chose originally for Zohar was very cryptic. It might give you the impression that the whole Zohar is just as cryptic. That's not the case. A lot of it is a dialogue, a conversation between a teacher and a student, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and other people they met, and then it records their teachings. So some of it feels just like a narrative. It's written in Aramaic, but some of it, or in Hebrew, different parts in Hebrew, some of it is a narrative, but a lot of it is very dense, like the one we read before. So in the Zohar, it describes a conversation, a teaching on this verse of let us make man in our image. Says the Zohar in text 14, let us make a human being in our image, after our likeness. That's the verse from Genesis. Each Sephira imparted its portion to the human being, internally and externally. Had even one of the 10 Sefirot not imparted its portion, the structure of the human being would have been incomplete. Without this 10 Sefirot, humans don't exist. Now he writes, this is now that's the Zohar's teaching. But let's jump ahead to the Kabbalists and Sefat, and we'll see how they express this idea. And all of a sudden, we start to understand it a little better. Let's look at text 15. This was written by the Ramak, Reb Moshe Cardivero, the earlier of the 2 great Kabbalists in Tzfat. He writes, let's get a volunteer to read this. Genya, read for us text 12. Text 15, sorry. Text 15, page 258.
The colored vessels analogy. Okay, oh my gosh. In truth, in regard to our creator, the infinite creator of all, we cannot speak nor describe nor require neither judgment nor compassion, neither anger nor wrath, neither variation nor limitation, nor any properties whatsoever, not before the emanation of the 10 Sefirot, nor now after they were emanated. What
Okay,
we
just to summarize, let me summarize that paragraph. God in his essence is pure. And now that the whole world exists, God didn't become less pure or less infinite or less indescribable. He's still the same. Okay, next paragraph.
Okay. What we should know, however, is that at the very beginning, God emanated 10 Sefirot, and we can provide a nice analogy to make the matter understood by the mind of the wise thinker.
Continue.
And Stan Reed, he had 2 sentences.
Okay, no problem.
That's
So,
fine.
Stan, go ahead.
The analogy is of water that is distributed among various vessels. These vessels are of different colors. One is white, another is red, another is green, and so on with the rest of them. Now, when the water is channeled in these vessels, although the water itself is colorless, it will be seen in the colors of the respective vessels and appears to have changed its vessel's color. In truth, however, the water did not acquire any new color. The variously colored vessels have imposed their color on the water, but this imposition is only in relation to how the water appears to those who see it, not in relation to the water itself. So it is with the Sefirot. The vessels in the analogy are the divine attributes that we call loving kindness, power, beauty, and so on. Each is colored in accordance with its function. White, red, green, the light of the emanator, which is the essence of the 10 divine energies that flow into the 10 Sefirot, are like the colorless water, as they transcend all variations and functions. The variation in their effect on the world is only due to the differences in function of their vessels.
Okay, so you have water in the red cup, in the red jar. What color is the water? So what do you mean? The water is clear, but it looks red. Yeah, because you're seeing it in a red container, so it appears red. Take a light and shine it through a red glass. What's projected on the other side? Red light. But is the light really red? No, that vessel filtered out the spectrum. But you think, did you really lose light? No, sometimes you could put it back through a prism and get back to pure light. So that's the amazing thing about the projector. Here you have the projector we have here. It's projecting onto the screen light, but because of different filtering, we perceive it in a special way because it modulates the wavelength of the light. So you can see there's different colors. Right? So that's the same thing. God is like described as the water. It's pure. If you don't have these teachings, then you start thinking that God is the Sefirot, right? God gets angry. God gets this. These are dangerous ideas. Very dangerous. You say God is the soul of the world. That leads to Baruch Spinoza. I don't know if anyone knows about him, but he was a Jewish castaway. He believed that God is nature and nature is God. So God is one with the universe. And the universe is one with God. And they're not separable. That's such a slight tweak from Kabbalistic teachings, and now it becomes heretical. Because you say, oh, God is limited to the world, to the universe. Such a slight tweak. He said, yeah, what do you mean? God is the soul of the universe. Yeah, but God is not God exists way beyond. He's just expressing himself to the universe, and the universe is within him. But God is not the universe. God is way beyond the universe. God is the space of the universe, but the universe is not God's space. God exists way beyond that. So it's this very subtle idea. These Kabbalistic teachings are so subtle because they're coming to explain paradoxes, and the solutions are very subtle. But if you make one wrong turn, you could end off and straying in dangerous places. So one of the critiques that the early opponents of Hasidism were saying, you know what the Hasidim believe? They believe that God is wood and stone. Right? Sounds like just like the imagery that Abraham was knocking down. People that believe in idols. What were early Hasidic teachers teaching? They were teaching the Kabbalistic ideas that God is found within everything. God is everywhere. There's no space where God is not, just like the soul is everywhere. Were the Hasidim saying anything new? The Talmud says that God is like this, the soul of the world, just like we are. But if it's taken out of context, it could be extremely destructive. But in the right context, it's extremely healing and powerful. And it's like a potion. Think of any medication, could save and could kill. They could save lives, could kill lives. So that's why there's so much myth around Kabbalah. But Hasidism has tried to make it more explainable. So let's look at this idea. We saw how the Kabbalists explained this idea, but is there any way to make this teaching more relatable? So now we're going to fast forward a few hundred years, and we're going to see how Hasidic masters have made this idea even more relatable, this idea of the colored vessels. It's not everyday terminology. It sounds like I'm learning science. Like, okay, so hold on, when light goes through glass, the light does appear to change. So what do you mean it didn't change? It does change. You just created for yourself a whole new set of questions that you have to go speak to a physicist to resolve. Does the light change when it goes through the glass? Does it not change? So how did the Hasidic masters explain it? They use the beautiful analogy of when a parent plays with their child. That can be found in texts where we're not going to read it inside, but in text 16 is the Maggid of Mezrich explaining this was the person who we explained became ill because of disseminating Kabbalah. I'll just say outside what he explains. Imagine you come into a room and you see an adult playing like a child. He's acting like a little child because he's playing with his 2-year-old son. Would you walk in and say, oh, that parent, he's so immature. He's so immature. You say, no, he's being a loving parent. He's putting himself into the world of the child by acting childlike. You have adults that are aloof from their children. They don't know what's going on in their children's inner worlds. But then you have the parents that are trying to connect and attach to their children. So even if the parent doesn't care about whatever the little girl cares about, but the little girl cares about American Dream Doll, I also care about American Dream Doll. It would be foolish to say that the sum of the parents is what what she's like when she's acting with her daughter. That'd be foolish. That's not the whole parent. But when the parent bends down to come to her on her child's terms, it's a beautiful thing. That's not the whole of the parent. So now this beautiful Hasidic teaching gives a lot of flavor and warmth and vibrancy and makes it very relatable in everyday terms. This great Kabbalistic idea that God's creating of the world is like a parent coming close to a child and embracing a child. Gives us so much more vivid imagery and helps us make sense of these terms. Now when you look back at biblical texts and Talmudic texts and Midrashic texts, you see that all this language is all there. What do we say in the Siddur? Avinu Malkeinu, my father, our king. Oh, you're calling God a father as if he's your friend, he's your buddy. Once you learn Hasidism, now all these ancient teachings, which if you asked about them 500 years ago, you say, don't ask. We don't ask. You ever heard it? Maybe from the earlier generation remembers, if you ask questions, what were you told? In Judaism, we don't ask. But that's not really true. It was just dangerous, or people didn't know the answers. But now people want the answers. People need the answers. There's so much other noise in the world that we want clarity, and we want to know, what is it really that we believe? What is Hashem, and how do we have a real relationship with him? And so that's what it comes to explain. Now we're going to remember we started off the workshop with text 5, that text. Gail, you read text 5 for us, right? Text 5, that reading. Now we're going to take a look at text 5, but this time we have all the teachings of the later Kabbalists from the 1500s, from the 1600s, from the Hasidic masters in the 1800s, and now we get some taste. So first of all, so we read at the beginning of the manifestation of the king's will. that means God had a desire to create the world. Before he created the world, what was there at the beginning? Kabbalah is describing what it looked like. You can look on the screen if you could read all the ways on the screen. I don't know if you'll be able to. The lamp of darkness engraved engravings in the supernal purity. So what's supernal purity? That's God's undefinable essence of God. The undefinable essence of God is the real essence of God. But God engraved engravings within himself. That's the Sefirot. He engraved within himself. Now, when you engrave in glass, let's say you engrave an inscription in glass, is the text really separate from the stone, from the glass? No, it's one within it, but it gives you a certain dimension. And how did God do that? With that lamp of darkness. You know how a lamp is, it's like a contradiction. What's a lamp of darkness? You call darkness. No, but we said it's a power. This darkness, this concealment is an infinite power. It's a light of concealment. There's a light of revelation and there's a light of concealment. It's an infinite power of concealment. That's the lamp of darkness. The paradox of Tzimtzum, which is what creates that contraction, that space for stuff to emerge, for otherness to emerge. Neither white, nor black, nor red, nor green. That God himself is not any color, but from within the center of the lamp, a fountain spouted from which the colors down below were painted, which is the colored vessel analogy. So now, with all this training and teaching, we still don't really understand it fully, but at least you get a little taste. Aha, I see this cryptic Zohar. I see why it wasn't taught publicly, but now I also see that it was, to those that understand it, it contains powerful secrets into the relationship of God and the world. And this was something that Avraham was studying. This was something Rav Shimon Bar Yochai was studying, but not necessarily were they all using the same language. They all knew the truth, because when you see truth, truth is truth when you see it. When we're coming generations later, we're trying to glean the truth from people who saw the truth. So now they have to try their best to give imagery to explain truth to us. But it's like explaining colors to a blind person. You could give descriptions of colors. You could say, this color works at this wavelength and that color works at that wavelength. And they say, oh, I hear. So I heard the person knocked on the red door. Oh, so now I know that doors are red. No, you got it wrong. Not all doors are red. Some doors are red. Okay, I hear. So doors can be red, but not all doors are red. So that's how we're learning Kabbalah, is we're hearing descriptions from our ancestors who are on Mount Sinai, who saw, or prophets who saw mystical visions, and then they're trying to express to us what they saw in terminology. But that terminology, if misunderstood, is extremely dangerous because you end up turning God into an image, which God is not in an image. Okay, now, remember I said Hasidic teaching, one of the things it tries to do, outside of explaining Kabbalah, it tries to show how all the different parts of Torah really feed into each other. Okay, so let's look, before we do that, let's look, another idea Hasidism tries to do, is it tries to make every part of Kabbalah meaningful and relevant to all of us, because that's a fact. Torah is a book of instruction. Torah is meant to be relevant. So when I'm learning about the 10 spies having a fight in Israel, it's not just a historical fact. Somehow that's relevant. That's going to help me become a better Jew. Well, how does it do that? So it says, let's look at this Kabbalistic teaching. We have this great paradox, and it represents two options and two lifestyles of what it means to be a human being. You have option one, pursue material gains while ignoring the spiritual yearnings. Because if you're going to be caught up in spiritual yearnings, you're not going to have that much fun. You're not going to have that much fun. You're always going to be worried, is this food that I'm eating, is it ethical? Is it the right time? Is it, what kind of fun is that? I can't be ambitious. I can't enjoy the world. The world is here. Let me enjoy it. That's one lifestyle. There's another lifestyle. Lead an aesthetic lifestyle, denying the body's physical drives, recognizing that the body is a crutch and a container and a limit on my soul's infinite powers. When my soul was in heaven, it was seeing God in all its glory. Now the soul comes into our body, and 98% of the day we ignore the soul and we're thinking just about the body. Even if we're fully aware of the soul, we have to sleep, we have to eat, we have to do this, we have to do that. What kind of life is that? So we have these two choices. What should we do? Well, the Kabbalists just taught us the answer. What's the proper approach? Is it one or two? The answer is neither. God is not only infinite. He's not infinite revelation. He's not infinite concealment. He's not only expressed in spiritual. He's not only expressed in material. God expressed in both. The whole of existence is his expression of both these forces. And so we must embrace the world that exists, the physical world, and our physical obligations that we have in the world, and be spiritual at the same time. That is a fundamental teaching. We must embrace both, recognizing their balance and their proper place, but we must embrace both, because that's how we connect to the creator of the world. Let's look at this teaching. God embraced both the material and the spiritual, and we do the same. Now we're going to take this teaching and show you in lesson 2 of this course. Lesson 2, we taught the roadside assistance law. I don't know if you remember that, but we taught roadside assistance law. Now we're going to look at that same teaching, but through a Hasidic lens. How does the roadside assistance law, how does it apply to me right now in this room? How am I going to walk into this room and, AAA did its job. No one needs my roadside assistance. How's this law going to change me? What's it going to change about the way I lead my life? So let's look at the verse. Let's look at the verse one more time through the simple lens, and then we'll put on it the Hasidic lens. When you see the donkey of your enemy collapsing under its burden, and you are inclined to desist from assisting him, you must assist with him. We learned, we had a whole discussion of numerous details of the law that we learned from that. Let's now take the Hasidic interpretation. The word for donkey, because it uses in the verse donkey. Now we know that roadside assistance law applies even if your enemy is using a camel. Same rules apply. You don't say, he said a donkey, not camel, I'm exempt. No, we learned in lesson 2, it applies to all animals. So why does the Torah use donkey? There's other explanations, but let's look at the Hasidic explanation. The word for donkey in the Torah is the 3 Hebrew letters ches, mem, resh, chamor, donkey. Those words, remember in the Torah scroll, there's no vowels, telling us we can read it another way. Chomer. Chomer means material. Materialism. The verse is speaking also about when you see materialism in front of you, or your materialism of yourself, which is your body. Your body is your materialism, your gashmius, your physicalness. So let's look at this verse again. When you see the chamar or the chomer, when you contemplate your material self and you think deeply about your bodily urges and needs, what will you discover? It's of your enemy. It's hateful. It's antagonistic to the soul, which yearns godliness. You will further see it's collapsing under its burden, that the body regards the Torah as a burden. To your body, it says, I want to enjoy my life. And my inner soul is telling me, no, you got to do mitzvahs, you got to do Torah. But to the body, it feels like a burden. So what you might think, and you are inclined to desist from assisting him. You may be inclined to deprive your body, to break its materialistic nature, but this is not the Torah way. Rather, you must assist with him. Elevate the body by refining it. Don't break your body. Don't fast yourself to death, torture your body, make your in other words, in this verse, we have two truths. The Torah agrees that your body can be an enemy. Torah says, yeah. And still, you must assist him. You have to work with your body. Your body can be harnessed for powerful good. And you have to elevate your body. You have to train yourself. You have to focus yourself. So your body wants to eat 7-layer cake. Good or bad? Well, you might say, terrible. However, what happens if it's Shabbat and you're supposed to enjoy Shabbat and your kids are sitting around the table and they're looking forward to Shabbat, but all there is on the table is broccoli and spinach? How much are your children going to enjoy Shabbat? Not very much. But now you put a little 7-layer cake at the end of the Shabbat meal. Now it's something to look forward for. So now you turned materialism into a mitzvah. So it's very important to have both things in mind. 7-layer cake can be an enemy. But don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. As long as this thing that you're using is not prohibited by Torah, in other words, if it was not kosher 7-layer cake, then even on Shabbat, just because you have good intentions doesn't make it kosher. But if it's something that the Torah doesn't explicitly exclude, then you might say, just because the Torah doesn't exclude it, it could be bad. Torah says, yeah, if it's materialism, it might cause soul desensitivity. When you eat non-kosher food, it makes your soul non-sensitive. Even if you eat kosher food for the wrong reasons, it makes your soul less sensitive. You're enjoying the world out of the context of the great Hashem and God that created the world. It's dulling you. It's making you less alive. But you might think, okay, I want to become alive, so let me cut myself off from materialism. No, that's also making you less alive. Because to be alive means to use the body in a healthy way. And so now here we see Hasidic teaching just brought a deep Kabbalistic idea and made it very relatable. But you might hear this teaching and you might not know all the Kabbalah, but it's based on Kabbalistic truths of these tzimtzum, of these 10 Sefirot, of these great lights. And so that's how Chasidism and Kabbalah is studied today. Let's conclude this lesson with remembering that different souls, every soul is meant to learn the entire Torah. If we don't learn the entire Torah, our soul keeps on coming back to continue learning the Torah, all parts of Torah. Eventually, our soul, throughout its different reincarnations, learns the entire Torah. So it's going to happen. You don't have to worry about that. But there's another mission that your soul, another one of your 3 missions. Also, you come down to complete all 613 mitzvahs. But another element is that within Torah, Torah is a mirror of the Jewish people. Each soul has a different part of Torah that it's meant to reveal. So you have your part of Torah that you're more connected to than anybody else, even than Moses. There's a part of Torah that you are the master of that part of Torah. You will bring great innovation and insight to that piece of Torah that nobody else can bring. Even Moses is waiting for you to bring that insight. So study Torah, but at first, where should you gravitate towards? The parts of Torah that you innately enjoy. And so we have 6 lessons, 6 different genres of Torah. Go find the parts of Torah that talk to you and learn it. Starts with maybe buying the books, but go master a field of Torah. Or if you like to touch on every field of Torah, you can do that too. Sometimes a strategy, someone who's learning a lot and his mind starts getting fatigued, so you just jump onto the next genre of Torah. You change things up. But Torah is a beautiful gift. There's a special JLI promotion we have in the library. Whoever wants to borrow this book, the Book of Jewish Knowledge, you can borrow this book. It's a beautiful museum quality book, full color. And if you want to buy this Book of Jewish Knowledge, which takes you through everything, it's like from the creators of the textbook. Then there's a promo code BookSmart10 on their website, myjli.com. I don't know exactly where they're selling it, but there's a promo code somewhere for it. Okay. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. It's very
Pleasure.
good.
Rabbi.
Thank you so much.
Let me end this.